Today on Know the Truth from Philip De Courcy.
That's what's wrong with the world. Man, in his fallenness, rebels against his Creator. Man, apart from the grace of God, is a danger to himself. Man, apart from the grace of God, is a danger to others. Man, apart from the grace of God, is in danger of the wrath of a holy God visited upon a rebellious world.
What will it take to bring true peace to earth? Welcome to Know the Truth. I'm Wayne Shepherd, and today Pastor Philip De Courcy reveals what happens when Christ displays his full control of our planet, illustrating how evil will be removed and righteousness will reign supreme. It's the conclusion of a hope-filled message called Peace at Last from our End Time series titled Things to Come. If you missed part 1, you'll find it online at ktt.org. Now let's get started. Here's Pastor Philip De Courcy.
Well, let's take our Bibles and turn to Revelation chapter 20. Before I went on my trip to Europe, we started a two-part sermon entitled Peace at Last. We're in a series called Things to Come. We're looking at the great turning points of biblical prophecy, events that still lie in the future to us. We've looked at the rapture. We have looked at the judgment seat of Christ, the tribulation period, the rise of the Antichrist, the future restoration of the nation of Israel, the coming of Jesus back to earth, and now we're looking at what's called the millennial kingdom. The fact that Jesus, upon his return, will establish a kingdom on earth that will last for 1,000 years. So with that said, let's open our Bible at Revelation 20 and finish this message, Peace at Last. Now, there's several things I want us to see. The last time we were together, we gave you an outline of this text: the removal, the resurrection, the reign, the release, and the rebellion. But we didn't fill in the details because we sought to answer one question: is the coming of Jesus premillennial? And I sought to give you 6 reasons to believe in the premillennial return of Jesus, whereupon he will establish a literal kingdom within history at the end of time. Let's look at the removal. The removal, verses 1 to 3. You'll see that the millennial kingdom begins with a removal. That is the removal of Satan, the extrication of Satan from within history. We're told an angel will come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit, which speaks of authority. He will lay hold of the dragon, and he will cast him into the bottomless pit and shut him up, so that he will deceive the nations no more. That's at the onset and the inauguration of the kingdom of the millennial reign of Jesus. Secondly, the resurrection. In our text, we see the restraint, the removal of Satan in verses 1 to 3. And then in verses 4 to 6, we have what we call the resurrection, the binding and removal of the devil. That old serpent is then followed by the resurrection of tribulation saints. Not only do we have the removal and the resurrection, we have the reign. That is the reign of Christ with his saints. 3 times in our text, staying in verses 4, 5, and 6, we are told that Jesus will reign and his saints will reign with him. Look at verse 4. And I saw thrones, and they sat on them, and judgment was committed to them. Look at the end of verse 4. And they lived and reigned with Christ for 1,000 years. Look at the end of verse 6. And they shall reign with him 1,000 years. At the end of history, a new administration will take over the governance of planet Earth under the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And you and I, if we're followers of Jesus Christ, will be part of that new administration. Matthew 5:5 says what? Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. What a promise. The lowly, despised disciples of Jesus Christ will inherit the earth. We will reign with him. What a moment of vindication. What a moment of victory. In the end, the righteous win and come out on top. And what a happy time that will be. In fact, we read in verse 6, blessed and holy is he who has part in the first resurrection and who shall reign with him 1,000 years. What a happy time that will be when Jesus will reign in righteousness. And the glory and the knowledge of the Lord will fill the earth as the waters fill the sea. It's at that time we will truly sing, joy to the world, the Lord has come. Now, I know we sing that at Christmas, but we shouldn't, because that's a hymn that has nothing to do with the first coming and everything to do with the second coming. Next time you sing it, notice its words, joy to the world, the Lord has come. Let earth receive her King. This was written by Isaac Watts. And you'll know that it's related to the second coming if you look at stanza 3 and stanza 4. No more let sins and sorrows grow, nor thorns infest the ground. Verse 4, he rules the world with truth and grace and makes the nations prove the glories of his righteousness and the wonder of his love. I don't know if you've looked at the fields recently, but there's still thorns infesting them. And God is not proving the nations at this time. But there'll come a time when we will truly sing with great joy and happiness, joy to the world, the Lord has come. And let me look at this reign ever so quickly under several questions, just to get a feel for what this time will look like. In fact, this deserves a series of sermons in itself. Number one, when? Well, we've already kind of established that, but I want to go back over this. When will this kingdom take place? It will take place in the future, and it will be attached to the second coming of the Lord Jesus Christ. We've argued that's the chronology of the book of Revelation, but the verse that stands out to me is 2 Timothy 4, verse 1. I charge you, therefore, before God and the Lord Jesus Christ, who will judge the living and the dead at his appearing and his kingdom. When does the kingdom come? When the king comes. That seems to be the clear implication of 2 Timothy 4, verse 1. You know, the Bible talks about God's establishing his everlasting kingdom. And the millennial kingdom is part of that. It's phase 1 of the establishment of this everlasting kingdom. This part, or this phase of the establishment of God's everlasting kingdom will last for 1,000 years. That's qualified 6 times in our text of Revelation 21 to 10. But you'll go to chapter 22 and verse 5 and you'll read this, and they shall reign forever and ever. When Jesus comes back, he will establish a kingdom that will last for 1,000 years. And at the end of that, you'll have a new heaven and a new earth where that kingdom will merge with the expression of God's everlasting kingdom. I like the way someone has put it. The millennium is the first front porch to the eternal state. When? At the second coming. Where? On planet Earth. Who will inhabit the millennial kingdom? Glorified saints and unglorified saints. The resurrected, glorified saints of the tribulation period who were martyred. The church age saints, the Old Testament age saints, all glorified. And then those who survived the tribulation and who have come out of the judgment of the sheep and the goats, and they enter in an unglorified natural body. Because there will be procreation in the millennial kingdom. Children will be born. We'll come back to that. Why? Why have a millennial kingdom? What's the purpose of the millennial kingdom? That is a sermon in itself, but there are several reasons. I'll just run down them. To fulfill the Old Testament promises to Abraham and David. Abraham and his descendants were promised a land as an everlasting possession. And upon the Messiah's return, you'll have the restored fortunes of Israel. Zechariah 12, 13, and 14. David was promised a throne that would be established forever in Jerusalem. You'll have the vindication of Jesus and his exaltation before the nations, when every knee will bow and every tongue confess. You'll have the reward of faithful saints. Those who endure will reign with him. 2 Timothy 2 verse 11, we've quoted it several times. You'll have the open display of Satan's defeat. You'll have a creation that's redeemed. That's Romans 8, 19 to 22, where a creation that groans and desires to be liberated from the judgment of God and the effects of the fall, that will take place upon the liberation of the sons of God. And then you'll have the establishment of the sovereignty of God. What? What will the kingdom be like? What will be the conditions of the kingdom? It'll be a time of climate change, a time of peace among the nations, a time of moral elevation, a time of spiritual exhilaration, a time of health, harmony, holiness, and happiness. In his book, Global Reset, which I commend to you, our friend Jeff Kinley walks through some of the conditions of that period of time. Forgive me, we're going to go through this quick, and I'll throw some text your way. You can listen to the message again and do some of your own homework. But one of the marks of this period of time will be permanent peace. See, Jesus is coming back as the Prince of Peace, and the government is on his shoulder. And he will establish his rule on the earth, and he will establish peace. Isaiah 2 verse 4 tells us that men will beat their swords into plowshares. Wars will be ended. Isaiah 9, 4 to 6, 7. You'll have the Pax Messiah, the messianic peace. It will be a time of perpetual happiness. A spirit of exuberant joy and happiness will mark the world. Passages like Isaiah 9, 3 to 4, Zephaniah 3, 14 to 17 show that depression, discouragement will be banished from human experience. There'll be pervasive glory. Though a prophet talks about God's glory and God's knowledge filling the earth like the waters fill the sea, the world will be awash with the presence of God in pervasive glory. There'll be prevailing justice. He will rule the nations with a rod of iron. Revelation 2:27. Evil will be restrained and sin will be reproved and righteousness and justice will be established. There'll be perfect health care. Those living on the earth in human bodies during the millennium will live long lifespans as in the days before the flood. Isaiah 65 verse 20. And lastly, and again, this is not exhaustive, but selective, profound prosperity. Hunger, thirst, and homelessness will not exist. The desert will blossom, and the world and the nations will thrive under the wise leadership of Jesus Christ. Isaiah 35, 1 to 2, Amos 9, 13 to 14. Those are the conditions that will exist when Jesus returns and reigns, as Eden is revisited and restored. Let's move on quickly. Time is gone. Last two thoughts, we'll move quick. The release. This is challenging. Kind of verses 7 through 10, but especially 7 and 8. Now, when the 1,000 years have expired, Satan will be released from his prison and will go out to deceive the nations which are at the four corners of the world. Listen to this. This is striking. Following the second coming of Jesus, you'll have a second coming of Satan. Now, our nation is struggling right now from the silly policy of this administration where we catch and release illegal aliens in our country. And crime and chaos is the result. We've got to stop this nonsense of catch and release. If you enter our country illegally, you should be immediately deported. But talking about catch and release, it seems that God does some catching and releasing here in Revelation 20. Because he catches Satan and he imprisons Satan for 1,000 years and then he releases him back into the world to deceive it. How do you explain that? What's the purpose of that? Well, Dr. Louis Sperry Schaeffer, founder of Dallas Theological Seminary, which I mentioned a moment ago, was once asked why God loosed Satan after he had once bound him, to which he replied, if you can tell me why he let Satan loose in the first place, I'll tell you why he let Satan loose in the second place. It's a good answer. It's a good answer. But let's try and come to some kind of resolution. And in the studying I've done and the commentaries I've consulted and the wise men I have listened to, I think this is the reason: to prove the justice of God's judgment and to show that man is an incorrigible sinner. Satan's release and subsequent rebellion demonstrates the inherent wickedness of the human heart in a perfect environment. Jeremiah 17 verse 9 would remind us that man's heart is deceitful and desperately wicked, and it will be proven at the end. Because remember, there is a group of people that enter the kingdom righteous, but still in their natural bodies. Marriage will take place during the millennial kingdom. Children will be born, and many of them will not be born again. Many of them will not submit to the lordship of Jesus Christ. And in the end, they'll be part of a rebellion as Satan is released. And does that not prove both the justice of God's judgment upon man and the fact that man is an incorrigible sinner? One writer, Robert Muntz, in his commentary on Revelation says this: apparently 1,000 years of confinement does not alter Satan's plans, nor does 1,000 years of freedom from the influence of wickedness change people's basic tendency to rebel against their Creator. You know the story, don't you, about the London Times many years ago that asked this question to its readership: what is wrong with the world? And the English essayist and moralist G.K. Chesterton wrote to the editor of the Times of London, dear sir, you ask what is wrong with the world? I am. That's what's wrong with the world. Man, in his fallenness, rebels against his Creator. Man, apart from the grace of God, is a danger to himself. Man, apart from the grace of God, is a danger to others. Man, apart from the grace of God, is in danger of the wrath of a holy God visited upon a rebellious world. Finally, the rebellion, as we close. Verses 7 to 10. Satan is released. He goes out and he deceives the nations. And under his leadership, they gather together to battle against the camp of the saints in the beloved city. And fire comes down from heaven, destroys them, and Satan is cast into the lake of fire. The devil is a repeat offender. Upon his release, he goes back to his wicked ways of deceiving the nations. He becomes a Pied Piper for those who were born within the millennium, who have not bowed their hearts to the lordship of Jesus Christ, and they will join him in one final act of rebellion. There has been outward conformity on the part of some during the millennial kingdom. They have not repented. They have not believed in Christ. And that facade collapses upon the reappearance of Satan and the rallying cry to attack the beloved city, the camp of the saints, and King Jesus himself. The rebellion is not successful because God extinguishes it in a ball of fire. The devil is dealt with singularly and cast into the lake of fire. That's his final resting place. One of unrelenting misery for him, which seems so appropriate since he is the spreader of such misery among men. By the way, when I read that, the devil who deceived them was cast into the lake of fire, I did remember hearing something that Jack Hayford said on a radio broadcast one day, and I wrote it down. I thought it was so good, and I want to share it with you. He said this: the next time the devil reminds you of your past, you remind him of his future. See, he's an accuser of the brethren. He likes to dig up our old sins and disturb our peace. But you need to tell him that you have passed from death unto life and you will not come into judgment. And if he reminds you of your past, you remind him of his future. So as we close, a word of exhortation. Keep going in the light of what's coming. Having something to look forward to keeps us moving ahead, doesn't it? If you're in a dead-end job, it's the thought of Friday that keeps you going. If you're 3 hours into a 6-hour drive to the coast, it's the thought of the ocean waves and the sandy beach that keeps you going. If you're months into an exhausting pregnancy, it's the thought of holding a beautiful baby at the end of that keeps you going. If you're in the throes of cancer, fighting radiation treatment, it's the thought of a good health report that keeps you going. Keep going, friends, in the light of who's coming and what's coming. There's coming a kingdom of righteousness, peace, and joy. In your fight with sin, remember it will give way to a kingdom of righteousness. Being endangered in a world that hates Christ will give way to a kingdom of peace, and our sorrows and our suffering will give way to a kingdom of joy. Do remember to keep going in the light of what's coming. This is training time for reigning time. Admiral Jim Stockdale was the highest-ranking United States military officer during the Vietnam War. He was a prisoner in the Hanoi Hilton, as it was famously known. He was tortured more than 20 times over 8 years. He lived out the war with no prisoner's rights, no set date of release, no certainty that he would survive and see his family. But he did survive, and he did return home, and he was asked how he did it, to which he replied, "I never lost faith in the end of the story." Don't lose faith in the end of the story, for it will be worth it all when we see Jesus. Keep going in the light of who and what's coming. Peace at last.
You're listening to Know the Truth with Philip De Courcy and the conclusion of a 2-part message in Revelation. It's titled Peace at Last. To replay the full message, visit ktt.org. And most importantly, share this with a friend. Because at Know the Truth, our ultimate mission is to share the gospel with a world in need of truth. Isn't that right, Philip?
Absolutely, Wayne. Our mission is to ensure believers are encouraged daily in their faith to grow and live biblically. Our mission is to ensure that believers are equipped to serve in their local church and community, and our mission is to ensure believers can engage in sharing the gospel everywhere they go. Through expositional preaching and teaching, we deliver bold, clear, and convincing and convicting pastoral and theological content. But we can't do it alone. It's the support of our listeners like you, that keeps KTT on the air, reaching thousands every day with the gospel message. So, we invite you to continue turning to and tuning in on a daily basis. And consider joining us in our mission to spread the truth to a world in need of truth. Wayne, could you share how our listeners can get more involved?
Well, the best way to get involved is by becoming a Truth Ambassador and giving monthly to Know the Truth. To sign up, call 888-644-8811 or visit ktt.org. As a thanks for your gift of any size, you'll receive a timely 3-part volume titled The Prophecy Collection by Pastor Philip's good friend, Mark Hitchcock. As we prepare for the Lord's coming, this book will help you understand the biblical truths you need to know in order to face an increasingly dark and decaying world. But today is the last day we're offering this resource, so call now. And again, that's 888-644-8811 or visit ktt.org. I'm Wayne Shepherd. Join us tomorrow when Pastor Philip examines history's final judgment in a message titled The Court of No Appeals. That's Tuesday on Know the Truth. Today's program was produced and sponsored by Know the Truth Incorporated. Jesus said, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free."